Trouble sometimes I hear, feeling men's hearts with fear. Freedom we all hold dear, now is that stay. Humble your hearts to God, save from the chastening rod. Seek the way pilgrims trod, Christians away. My Jesus is coming soon, morning or night or noon. Many will meet their doom.
Thanks for joining us. We have one of Nashville's most famous and prominent good people here with us today, and we're just thrilled to have Charlie Strobel here.
Hey, Elijah.
Good to have you here.
Great to be back.
Now, am I supposed to call you Father Strobel, Charlie Strobel, Dr. Strobel, Brother Strobel? What am I supposed to call you?
Whatever's comfortable. Charlie's great.
I tell people my mama named me Lytle. That's good enough for my mama. It's good enough for anybody.
There you go.
I'm glad to have you here.
It's great to be back. Thank you. You've always reached out to us and helped us, and I appreciate it so much.
You've made a footprint on the city of Nashville, haven't you?
Well, God has done a lot of good things, and
you believe in God?
Yes, I do.
You trust Him?
Absolutely.
You think so? You think He got some answers?
He better.
What motivates you to do? You have a passion for people that are in a disadvantaged situation, or poor people.
Always.
What's the proper way to say that? The people
marginalized, people that are on the edge of society, the mainstream of the benefits of society. Yeah, all the people that I grew up around when I was a boy. I still remember all of those incidences, and it just stayed with me.
Where did you grow up?
Grew up in North Nashville, just north of the Bicentennial Mall. Before it was a mall, it was a farmer's market, and before that it was a clump of weeds that we called the jungle, and there were guys in there who were camping out some of the original tent cities.
Back before Tent City was there, that was it, huh?
That was a tent city, and I kind of weaseled my way in there and got to know them, and it was an area where poor people worked for poor people. People took in laundry for other people. Not everybody had a washing machine.
Now, where was that in relation to Sufferdale?
It was about 3 blocks away. I was on 7th, and Sufferdale was between 4th and 5th. Went down there a lot, many nights. I saw a lot of ball games there.
I remember coming to Nashville with my father. I was in Giles County. I grew up outside the Pulaski, out in the country out there. We had a farm in Giles County, and we came up here to the stockyards. We'd bring cattle up here to the stockyards.
I could smell them every night.
I remember walking into the main office. It's still down there at the restaurant. I've gone up those steps with my daddy when I was probably 6, 7 years old.
Yeah,
walking up those steps.
Well, those memories never leave us, and
they're good memories.
Yeah, they are, and they define who we are. I think as we grow into adulthood. I remember that area. There were people who sold vegetables off the backs of horse-drawn wagons, and there were other people who delivered ice, and they were the iceman for the ice boxes. Nobody had refrigerators. There were men who came with wagons, and they had big barrels in the back, and they picked up people's garbage, food garbage, not trash. You burned those, and they were the slop men, and they fed their pigs.
Feeding hogs somewhere.
Yeah, feeding the hogs, yeah.
Boy, times change, don't they?
Sure have.
But there's still people hurting.
And they're more invisible. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the troubles that we face, is that how do we get people to rally around supporting what you're doing, what we're trying to do, because who's going to speak for the poor? You do, and others do, but not everybody is willing to listen to the stories of the poor and the hardships they have.
Brother Strobel, there's two things I want to talk about. One is what we need to do for the poor in Nashville. I want you told us last time you was here, and you are the founder of RoomatheInn, yes, which is an outstanding program. You got all the religious community working together. You brought the city together to help the poor, which I think is just remarkable. I wish I could do that. You told a story about when you let them in your church building a long time ago on a cold winter night. I want you to tell that story because there's people out here, they need to know that.
Well, it was a a situation I didn't think about. Had I thought about it, I probably would have talked myself out of it. But they were sleeping in my...
You wouldn't have either.
Well, I hope not.
You wouldn't have.
Well, but they were in my parking lot. I was the pastor of Holy Name Church, and the rectory or the parsonage was right on the same property. And I was sleeping inside, and they were outside sleeping in the parking lot. And had they been down the street, that would have been somebody else's problem. But that night, they were my problem, and I didn't know what else to do. So I went out and invited them in to spend the night in the church.
It was cold.
It was cold. It was
cold.
Below freezing. And told them, here, I'll bring you breakfast in the morning. Don't hurt each other and don't burn the building down. Well, I knew they wouldn't because I knew them. But I, the next morning, brought them breakfast. And before I invited them in, I thought to myself, now if I do this, I may end up doing this for the rest of my life, because they'll be back, tomorrow night and the next night. And sure enough, they did. But I thought for just a moment, and like Scarlett O'Hara, I thought, well, I'll think about it in the morning, and invited them in. And of course, the next night there they were again, and they've been that way ever since.
You saw a need, and I'm sure there were some people in your church or in your organization that didn't think that should have happened.
Right.
But you stood in the gap for the poor.
Well, they were concerned, they said, for me and my safety. And I think that a lot of it was they were concerned about the building.
Right.
That
People
the building
are more
might...
concerned about building than they are you, I can tell you that right now.
But I said not to worry, I know who they are, and they're kind, and they're not dangerous people. And trust me.
But anybody's different. Now, you've studied all kind of psychology. Where'd you go to school?
Well, I went to Father Ryan here in Nashville. Then I went to the seminary and ended up in Catholic University in Washington, D.C. during the 60s.
What is it about our sinful nature or our human nature, or that if something is different, why do we always think it's something wrong with it? What makes us do that?
Well, I think we're afraid. And we're afraid that there might be situations that we wouldn't be able to handle, and it'd be dangerous for us. And so we're scared of what is unknown. And of course, I know how much work you do in race relations. People are afraid of people because of the color of their skin. And Gordon Allport wrote a great book on the nature of prejudice, and he said, there's a little vignette, two men are walking down the street, and they see a third man across the street, and one man says to the other, "Do you see that man over there?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Well, I hate him." And he says, "But you don't know him." And he says, "That's why I hate him." So if we know people, and know who they are, and it diminishes our fear. And I think a lot of people are put off by people that are different.
I was once, when I started out, and I was raising money, getting support for the ministry, I'd go into churches, and it always asked me what was the breakdown of black versus white. What was the breakdown? Well, I didn't know. So I got the bright idea one Sunday, I'll count. Charlie, I tried 3 times and quit trying to count, because what I would wind up doing, of course I was slow. I mean, we all know I'm slow to start with. The people I had a close relationship with, I'd count them as white. And I'd be going along counting, and well, he's African American, and I counted him white. And I tried 3 times and gave up, because I could not count. If I knew them well, if I was a friend with them and close to them, I counted them white. And
color disappeared.
And so I said, man, there's a lesson there. I appreciate all the people who asked me those questions, which really had and it incensed me up until then. It made me angry, but it was a good thing for me. It was a good experience for me. And I appreciate them asking me those questions and driving me to do that, and find out that love is the answer. And when you love people, and you love those people outside your house on that night, and you couldn't stand to see them out there in the cold, so you let them in.
And people know if you love them. They say a dog will know if you love the dog, and it can sense fear. And if you're helping but you're not really loving, that can be not oppressive, but it may not help like we think.
Right.
Just because we're helping doesn't necessarily mean we're loving.
And it's 2 different things.
That's right.
A lot of people help.
Yeah.
And it's a tokenism. is what our folks call it.
Yeah,
do-gooders.
paternalism, lots of words.
On the street we call it do-gooderism.
Do-gooders. I hadn't heard that. I remember that.
That's a good one. They would come down and want a do-gooder, but they're not going to get involved into it because they don't demonstrate that they love them.
Yeah.
A lot of people help out of guilt, and I'll take it. I mean, I'll rake it in out of guilt, you know, and help them to feel guiltier. But it
helps that way. But it's,
if people will break out and start to really know somebody and love somebody,
right, it changes their lives,
and it's so much more healthy. And the person who is giving benefits far more than, you know. My wife and I have always received the greater blessing of being in this ministry, and my staff too. They'll all tell you that they get the greater blessing than what we do.
So often, that is so true in our situation. So often in the RoomatheInn, we have volunteers and staff who will say that I've given more than I've received. I've received more than I've given. And so that we've got this kind of expression that goes like this. There's giving and receiving all mixed together, and you can't tell the difference. So with that casserole that you're offering to help somebody who's hungry ends up being an instrument of grace for yourself as you realize how much you've been given and received.
How many people do y'all house in the RoomatheInn on a given week, just a ballpark figure?
We averaged this past year about 220, and that's spread over 180 congregations throughout the city and even up into Hendersonville and down to Franklin. And then during the day, our campus for human development is open, and we have 200 to 300 people that come in and out of there for services. And then we now have added 38 apartments that are permanent housing for people who get into recovery and then end up getting a job and now or disability, and now they have income to pay for the rent. That's the only thing we've ever charged for, was the rent. And then we have another part of the campus that are for people who are in treatment for alcohol addiction, or they're coming out of hospitals and they need to recuperate, as you and I would need somebody to take care of us. Well, the hospitals can leave them on the street with a hospital bracelet on and some medicine, and they lose the medicine, or they fail to take it for whatever reason. And then they have to be readmitted into the hospital, so it's a cost avoidance issue that we've got. We've got people.
You're saving taxpayers a bundle of money.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because the guy's out there on the street on a bus bench, he's got a tag on and he's sick and can't take his medicine, he's going to go back to the emergency room.
That's right, yeah.
And one of my big fears, and it's one of the things that I haven't been able to grasp yet, I cannot imagine, there's two things: not having keys in my pocket. I don't know what it would feel like to go all day long being homeless and not having keys in your pocket. That would really be homeless.
To anything.
Yes, key to anything. You have nowhere to go. And I see them walking from point A to point B, and you knowing the whole time they ain't got anywhere to go.
And they call it the shuffle.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, you could go from one place, you might find food, and go to another place and find clothing, and somewhere else you might find a bed, or if possible. And what we've tried to do with the campus is to create a single site of services so they can come and access a lot of those same services. So in addition to the 200 to 300 that might be there during the daytime, and then stay over for the RoomatheInn, we've got another 100 almost now with the new building that are living there in some form of recovery and treatment.
And that's very needed, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I never had the problem of addiction that I've seen so often as you have also. But once I got to be a diabetic, and the doctor said, you can't cure it, you can control it. And I realized that's what addiction is about. It's about controlling. You can't. It's apparently not curable. People can control it, and first of all, they have to control it with their belief in God and a higher power.
They start with, you talk to somebody that's really trying to control it, and they'll say, I'm in recovery. They never, when you hear one that I'm healed, he's going back in.
No.
He's got a ways to go yet.
And the great thing that so often people fail to realize that it starts with God. It starts with their higher, and they're even hesitant to say who God is, so they say the higher power.
I'm finding more and more, to my joy, there's more and more people like yourself, like our ministry, like the rescue mission, more and more successful ministries in town that put God up on the front where he should be, and they don't apologize for trying to believe in God and do things God's way. And more of our community takes that stand, more healing is going to take place.
God is the source of healing, for sure.
Absolutely. The thing I was talking about that really gets to me, and it just really tugs at my heart, and y'all are addressing that now, is when a man comes out of the hospital and he's sick and he has nowhere to go, or a woman. That to me that's just horrible. I mean, that's just something that you just put in your prayer life, and you just, on a cold winter night when it's sleeting, and you think, well, man is out with a fever, and it's just terrible.
Well, we have, and that's why we tried to do a larger and expanded respite center at our guest house, because people come to us needing to bed rest for three reasons generally. One, they've had a chronic condition like heart trouble that's become acute, and they've been in the hospital and they need that. Or two, they've been injured by accidents, been hit by a car or something. Or three, they've been assaulted. Somebody stabbed them and they've got wounds and they need to heal. And we take for granted that somebody would let us have 3 days to sleep or to rest, or a week or two. We've had people
and they
stay.
Don't.
No, they don't. We've had people stay as long as 6 months. We had one Latino fellow who was stabbed in the heart, recovered, and we had him for 6 or 8 months, and he did recover and eventually left. Now, the snag is getting them, once they get stable enough to leave, to find them housing, and we have a tremendous shortage of affordable housing. They say all housing is affordable to somebody, but the housing that's affordable for poor people, marginalized people, is so short. And I mean, there's such a shortage here in the city that oftentimes people have to go back on the streets after they've recovered, and that's a sad situation.
Once they close, and I've got this in my mind, and you may have to correct me on it, and please do. But when Reagan, and I was a big Reagan fan, but when Reagan shut down the mental hospitals, did our country a tremendous disservice there to our people that was in those facilities.
Yeah, those who were mentally ill and those who had a stable place to stay and medication and all.
Somebody to help them take their medication. You know, people that are unstable mentally, they can't take their medication. They don't know to take their medication. They forget it.
Yeah.
And that was just...
Or they begin to feel better because it helps, and then they say, I don't need it anymore, and they become their own doctors. Yeah.
But I had a elderly lady that come to church with me that worked at Central State, and for 100 years. She'd been out there a long, long time. And she told me, she said, oh, this is a bad decision. It's a bad decision when they start turning these people. Can't nobody take care of these people.
Well, that happened also when they closed Clover Bottom. We had a lot of people who were mentally challenged, and they were left out. And I remember several of them that came to our church, and they stayed in boarding houses.
And they have nowhere to go.
No.
They have nobody. What can Nashville do? What does Nashville need to do? Now, you are a man of influence in this city, and everybody's waiting for you to give them this. What can we do? I listen to the council meet, and I listen to different councilmen. We can't do this, we can't do that. And everybody's trying to get reelected, you know, all that stuff. But that's another ball game. I'm getting into that. What does Nashville as a city need to do for our homeless population?
We need a dedicated source of funding for affordable housing. We need housing. The waiting list for people for Section 8 housing is huge. We need to be able to say, and one of the mechanisms for doing this is what they call a housing trust fund. We need to be able to dedicate some monies, and we have no dedicated source at this point. And the council can use their imagination and come up with some fee or something that would be a developer's fee that would make it profitable, more than break even for a developer to build some affordable housing. We don't have that. And it's an economic benefit for us to do this, because what will happen is those housing units can be in the core of the inner city and can provide for that workforce that we're going to need downtown. There's stories in the paper recently about the downtown shortage of workers, that people are not going to come in for 30, 40 miles to work.
Traffic's a killer.
Traffic's a killer. You've got to have a workforce and an adequate housing stock in the downtown inner city urban area. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we're facing.
We need to have affordable housing for our people that want to live in the inner city, before they can get jobs here. The jobs are going to be here.
The jobs will be here. If you look at the downtown and how it's developed versus 25 years ago.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes. I was so thrilled when they came up with and I'm one of the few people, I hear people criticizing all the time at the convention center. Yeah. That's going to bring all kind of jobs.
Oh, it is.
But now you're telling me the people that are supposed to be working there don't have a place to live here, so they're moved way out to Antioch somewhere and can't get in the morning.
And the transportation, they don't have the transportation to get in there. And we're working on mass transit. I know there's some plans about that, but
that's a long way off.
Yeah, it's a long way off. Yeah.
And so what you're proposing, if I got this straight, what needs to happen is the city needs to come up with enough money to build affordable housing that make a contractor say, I will build and manage. Is that what you're talking about? They can also manage it?
One of the Arts Commission, I think, gets 1% of a particular project, maybe the capital budget project. They get 1%, and that funds the Metro Arts Commission. I think the same kind of solution can be offered somewhere. The value, core value, I mean the bottom line value of housing starts or building permits. If you took 1/2 of 1% over the course of a year, it would amount to a huge amount of money.
Well, if you got people in and you start them on a graduated basis, start off and they have somebody get a job, and then they pay their rent once they start working, because the people are doing the training with them that's going through your programs, they'll be learning how to budget and do that kind of necessary economics to where they could provide for their own housing.
Yeah, and our 38 units are just a drop in the bucket, but those 38 units are filled with people who have worked downtown. Now they're working downtown at the convention center, at shops and all. And if they were out in the inner city, out in the suburbs, they would never have a job.
Now what happens to them? How long can they stay in your units?
Well, they're permanent housing, meaning that they can stay they have a lease. They're 6-month leases, so they can stay as long as they need. Many of them move on to try to upgrade and get to a larger, maybe a house rather than just an apartment.
What about you'll know the answer to this, out here off what used to be the Drake Motel?
Right.
What's that called? There's a whole big apartment complex in there.
Well, there's the I forget the name of it right now myself, but yeah, there's several. There were motels, and they converted them into single-room occupancy units.
Now, is that kind of what you're talking about when you say
Mercury Court? Yeah. Mercury.
Is that what you're talking about?
The
business people in that community are not happy with that.
Well, then the project has to be better maintained and better managed, and because if you can put people in there who have rules to follow, who are going to be responsible and who are going to have jobs, it doesn't have to become a slum. And that's the fear again, that something like that becomes.
You can see why people that's got a business right next door would be
Absolutely.
concerned that you said it's going to become a slum, and it's up to whoever does this thing.
The housing authorities have to make sure that this is.
They have to manage it
in a way,
in a healthy way.
Well, as you had to do with your any of the housing and all that you do.
We have to. You draw the line. And you have to go back and tell them again and again and again, and that was one time too many. You got to move on, and so you have to take those stands. So affordable housing is one of your passions right now.
Yeah, and we have to do that, and I say it benefits the city. We'll have a housing workforce. I mean, we'll have an employment
workforce downtown.
Downtown, and so it will benefit businesses to get behind this.
My guess is, somebody needs to be smart enough to figure all this out. I had a person in my office last week saying, I think I'm going to violate. We ain't got 3 minutes to go. We could talk forever. I think I'm going to violate so I can go back in.
Yeah.
She was having a hard time getting a job. And she was thinking about violating and go back in. Well, when she goes back in, she costs the American taxpayer a fortune. And I was trying to assure her no and help her sort through, and she really had no reason to violate because she's got one job working and got a promise for another job that is going to come through. So, you know, and I told her, we sat down and we mapped it out, and in 10 days, she is going to be, within 30 days, she's going to have money in her hands to do what she needs to do, and she left in good spirits because we had sorted through all that.
And you took the time to do that.
Yes, and she's a good woman. She should not have. She's a lifetime criminal, but she's on her feet trying to get there now, and she's going to make it. Now, if I'm thinking about every time we deter a child from going to prison, it costs $1.3 million, is a figure I always use, to incarcerate them for a lifetime, we save the American taxpayer a ton of money. When you give somebody, give them a place to stay, is to come out of the hospital emergency room and don't have to go back into the hospital, you save an American taxpayer a whole bunch of money. If somebody would take this thing and see prevention is, you know, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. If it sat down and put the pencil on this thing, I believe the people making the laws could see where we'd be a whole lot better off spend our money on the front end, taking care of people, rather than putting the Band-Aid on it when it's over, because it's going to cost.
It will. And instead of there being a tax drain, they become a tax-producing citizen.
That's right.
They start working, they start paying taxes, and they're part of the solution, no longer part of the problem.
There ought to be somebody at Vanderbilt smart enough to figure all this out. You might be smart enough to figure it out. I can't, but it's there. There is a, they can look at prevention.
On the front end.
And on the front end. And
well, all the work you do on the front end, working in the projects and getting people, on the young children, if you don't do it on the front end, we get them on the back end.
That's right. And if neither one of us do it,
then
Darren Hall gets them, and they go to prison, and that's what it really costs us.
It costs them and it costs us because of the crime they commit.
And you say, yes, and you can't put a dollar sign on the crime, and you think about 73% in it of the people incarcerated, their children will be incarcerated once you start that cycle. It's downhill, and well, we're out of time just about. Give me something for our city here. We got 30 seconds. Tell me something good for our city here that make them love Charlie Strobel.
Well, that love God is the major message. I think we all know that nothing we can do without the love of God. People have been great to us, and Mama always said people don't have to be nice to you. And it's true. Kindness is not an entitlement. People have really been nice to us over the years. I want to appreciate.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
We appreciate all you do. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Folks, it's all about putting God first. Love the Lord with all your heart, mind, and soul. Thanks for tuning in. God bless. Charlie, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Seek the way pilgrims trod, Christians away. My Jesus is coming soon, morning or night or noon. Many will meet their doom. Trumpets will sound, and all of the dead shall rise. Righteous me in the skies. I'm going where no one dies, heavenward bound. What troubles will soon be o'er, happy forevermore. When we meet on that shore, free from all care, rising up in the skies, telling this world goodbye.